Good evening, and welcome to Remembering Dorothea Benton Frank, an evening with her friends and family. This program is brought to you by the College of Charleston Alumni Association with support from its generous annual sponsors. Thanks to our good friends and our C of C family, and thank you for joining us. I am Gibbs Knotts, Dean of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences at the College of Charleston. In 2019, the literary community lost an icon in Dorothea Benton Frank, and the College of Charleston lost a beloved friend. I am honored to host this virtual gathering among those who knew and loved her most as they reflect on her life as a mother, a friend, and an inspiring member of a community of supportive authors. Joining us are Carrie Feron, Ms. Frank's editor at HarperCollins Publishers, Victoria Frank Peluso, College of Charleston class of 2008, Ms. Frank's daughter and an author in her own right, best-selling author Patti Henry, and best-selling author Mary Alice Monroe. Thank you all for being part of this special program. And so maybe, Carrie, I thought we'd start with you and just tell us a little bit about how you got to know Dottie and what your favorite memory of her was during your time together.
I have so many favorite memories. That's so hard. But first time I met her, she came to my office, because she wanted to change publishers. So we met each other. I served her some store-bought cookies on paper plate, which she always reminded me was incredibly tacky and not a very good first step. So she taught me something that day. But we worked together for 15 years, which is really a long time, and we became really dear friends. But I think, for me, what was really fun is all year she'd be working on this book, and she really was a seat of the pants writer. She didn't write outlines. She would just call up every once in a while and say, I'm thinking about sending them to Vegas now, as if they were real people. And then every single year she would turn in her book, believe it or not, in March. So on President's Day weekend, I would go to her house in New Jersey and I would sit on her couch and I would force her to print out the pages to prove that they existed. And after that, she would probably write like 5 more chapters in the next month, believe it or not. And then once again, we would meet and we would go over the whole thing. And honestly, sounds very stressful, but it was always like a party. Like wow. I would go down to South Carolina and she would cook for me and we would walk on the beach and we'd talk about everything. And sometimes we'd change major plot points. Sometimes we wouldn't. Sometimes there'd be a car accident outside the window. Sometimes there wouldn't. Like you just never knew what was going to happen. And that was the joy of Dottie. She lived so joyously in every moment, and she made even the tough times really fun.
So Carrie, I have to ask you, were you ever worried that you weren't going to make a deadline, or did you always know you would pull it off in the end? I'm curious.
I came to trust her. But I do think every time we had a new managing editor who wasn't aware of how tight the deadline was, they would be very nervous, and I would have to reassure them about once a week that I promise the book will happen, I promise. And we always made it.
Right.
We always made it.
Wow.
That's a great story. Frantic time.
But now during COVID, printing has gotten much tighter, and we're printing things across the seas. And I don't think we could have done that now.
I think
actually physically people need more time now.
Patti,
just hearing you say that makes me so nervous.
It didn't make me nervous.
No, I totally get it. Honestly, Carrie, I get it because that's what I've done for years. So I totally get it. It saves time. It really does when you think about it, because you don't have that back and forth. Dottie and we talked about this, how we wanted to get that draft to our editors as soon as possible, because if you're going to do the work, you do it with your editor, the person you really trust more than anybody else. And so it works.
That's great.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, I once worked with an author who wrote 5 books a year, and those books used to come like cannonballs. It'd be like you'd be absorbing one, and then the next one. Yeah, that was crazy. So this is more fun.
So Patti, what about you? What are some of your favorite memories with Dottie, and then how did you first get to know her?
So when I try to, I've been asked that a couple times, and my answer keeps changing, because like Dottie memories are like this big watercolor painting of, like, whether it's sitting on her back porch watching the sunset, or talking about our next books, or just her laughter that shook the room, or spending the night and waking up and she's already on fire, and I'm like, what's going on? But I met her at a SIBO, which is the Southeastern Independent Bookseller Association meeting, when my very first novel came out. And she came roaring up to me in her big, beautiful personality and introduced herself. And for the rest of our friendship, she was able to tell me what I was wearing the day she met me. That is Dottie. And the make of the suit. You were wearing I don't even remember, and she remembered. But my probably most memorable memory with her, besides this debacle that Mary Alice was with us when we went to Defusky. Do you remember? We called it the Defusky debacle.
Oh,
yeah,
Lord,
oh my gosh.
yes.
But besides that, where they sat us outside in the sun, yeah, it was a bonding moment. But it was the day that my son and I, who went to College of Charleston for a semester or two, spent the night at her house. And she had to get up the next morning to go, I think it was the luncheon, the big, Post and Courier luncheon. And I was making my son a bagel, and I forgot about it. And it was in a toaster oven with a basket on top of it. And it caught fire.
So you almost burned the house down.
Her house down. Literally, I almost burned her house down. And instead of making me feel badly, which I really did, because her house smelled for like a month, she said it would have been better to have burned it down so I could get the insurance money, which of course was not true, but it was just like her to say that. So there's a lot of those stories.
Was that the big house on Sullivan's?
Yes.
Oh.
Whoa. The new one. Yes. Yes. We opened all the windows. It was terrible. It was terrible.
So Mary Alice, I got to ask you about the Defusky debacle too, but yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I tried to forget it, Patti. Now it's coming back.
I know, your face was like, wait, what? And it comes back.
Oh my gosh. Well, the three of us were invited to a small but fun, supposedly, event on Defusky Island, which is a unique situation along one of the barrier islands off Charleston, and it's accessible only by ferry. So once you get there, you're there. You don't get to get off for a while. So it was arranged by another author, a man, who obviously doesn't have the same concern I think women do for each other in terms of comfort. And we arrived, the three of them, we all drove down together. We got on the ferry. We were looking forward to a really fun day because Patti knows Defusky really well. And so we get on a golf cart that's provided. We're going to the other side of the island, and there's this open expanse, like imagine a hot, grainy expanse, like hot being the operative word, no shade. And there's hardly anyone there, but there's a few picnic tables and one small square umbrella that the guy is standing
that he sat under.
He's just like, you guys can find a table over there somewhere. And we're sitting there. The bookseller doesn't know what to do, nothing to set up. We don't know where to go. And we just we hit was there wine or something right away and water. And we just sat there and fried for quite a while. And we kept picking the picnic table up and moving it as the sun shifted further under the shade in the trees because we were cooking in there. And we went to Patti's place afterwards, didn't we, in Bluffton? And I'll never forget that night. It was one of our best nights. where we would, you know how sometimes a bad experience can bond you? So I remember we all sat on this gorgeous patio at Palmetto Bluff and all ordered double dirty martinis.
Yes. But
And
I remember she was writing, because I remember talking about it on the ferry. She was plotting out The Last Original Wife.
Oh,
And,
I don't remember
and she
that.
hadn't decided what the ending was yet. And there was a man on the ferry listening. He was like, I'll tell you how it should end. You can imagine how Dottie reacted to that. So.
And Mary Alice, how did you meet Dottie? When did you guys first?
You know, it's funny. It's vague because I knew of Dottie before I met her. And because she lived on Sullivan's and I live on Isle of Palms, so we knew. But I don't think I met her until she invited me to a party. And it wasn't Sullivan's Island, it was another one. And she had the house, I think it was, I don't know which house it was. I don't think it was the first one. I think it was the second one.
I think.
Old Bug.
I think
yeah.
it was the Gold Bug.
Gold
Yes,
Bug,
it
yep.
was. And I remember I was on the turtle team, and we had just had an inventory, and I was covered with sand, and so I ran home and didn't even have time for makeup. I just didn't want to miss the party, so I put on clothes, and they're all wrinkled, and I show up, and I'm hello everybody, and I think it was just really a relaxed party. But I remember thinking, ooh, I didn't know everyone from New York was going to be here. I was in this wrinkled little outfit that I just thought we were all going to sit on the porch for a while. And it was fine. Everyone took pictures, and I'm sure that wrinkled yellow outfit is in perpetuity on someone's camera. But it was fun. Everyone was having a good, Dottie's parties were always fun and very welcoming.
So Victoria, I mean, obviously, growing up with such a famous mom, share some of your memories. I mean, what was it like growing up as Dottie's daughter, and kind of like when you look back on that time now, what are some memories that really stick with you?
I think now as a mother and as a wife, I think a lot more about like what it was like as her kid, mirroring her as a mother and wife. Her parties for certain, her friendships with other women, her creativity, her ability to get things done and show up for those that she loved. But it was the time of my life. It was just as much fun as anyone can expect, and more so. She was a riot. She was my best friend, and my soulmate.
That's
and
so sweet.
It was just great. It was great. And it's like, I'm like listening to y'all, but it was just so much fun.
I hope my daughter says that about me one day. That's beautiful.
They will.
She's
And
my best friend.
Right.
she really was my best friend. I even have her, I'm at my computer, and please excuse the ring light and everything else in the back. Y'all have such nice curated backgrounds with your matching Cavaliers.
Oh, we
Mine's coming tomorrow.
Oh, come on, Carrie. We'll show our matching Cavaliers.
Yeah, mine's coming tomorrow.
Oh, I thought you had your Cavalier. She's
coming
getting one of
tomorrow.
our Cavaliers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know.
too bad. One day
But
too
I mean,
late.
I have my mama right here.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's so
Look at
pretty.
that
She looks
picture.
beautiful. What a
That is
great
when she
shot.
started writing. It was during her first novel, Sullivan's Island, and that's her old office, which is on the other side of the house. And I
Look
had
how
it
long her hair is.
right here. Yeah. But my mother said she's like me. She liked to play with hair color. So she was blonde, she was red, she was long, she was short,
Ah.
always a good accessory, always a fun party. And Mary Alice, you were like, oh my gosh, I was expecting we'd all just sit on the porch. That's the thing with my mom. You never knew if it was going to be black tie or casual. It was just, but you knew it was going to be fun.
You knew the food would be fabulous. Your
That's
mother
right.
never had bad food or bad
That's right.
wine.
That's why we'd never be skinny women, because we just love to eat. But it was fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the strongest memory that I have of my mother outside of professional writing and storytelling, which of course is always a part of our lives, is the birthday parties that she threw for me and my brother.
nice.
So she would throw them to be like normal kids have like a piñata and a sheet cake. My mother was like, what do you like? I was like, The Wizard of Oz. She's like, got it. So she bought a sewing machine and made me a Dorothy costume and hired actors to play the lion, the witch, like all this stuff. And it was crazy. And my son's birthday is coming up in a couple of weeks and he wants a space party. So naturally I am buying beach balls and spray painting them to be the solar system and hanging them from my ceiling. My husband thinks I'm insane. And my dad's like, no, you don't know. This is genetic. You can't stand in the way of it. Yeah, she's just.
That's awesome. And your wedding. I mean,
at my wedding, yes.
Beautiful wedding.
Oh my gosh.
Your wedding was
Memorable.
gorgeous.
Thank you.
it was memorable and
Thank you.
beautiful.
It
And
was.
Thank
yeah.
you.
From the Gullah
Her
singers to the
shining
dancing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
I don't think I ever saw her look more beautiful than she did. At
I
the
agree.
night.
No, that's true.
I actually used the picture. Sounds weird, but like for all of her like memorials and stuff like that, I used the pictures from the wedding because she just looked like the queen that she was.
glowing.
Yep,
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
did.
And she used to say to me, she'd be like, "Man, it's my favorite wedding I've ever been to. I'm so glad it was yours." I was like, "Me too." You know?
Oh,
We had a
that's
blast.
nice. That's
We had a
yeah.
blast
Well,
all the time,
That's awesome.
every day.
that's great. Yeah, Carrie, I wanted to go back to you and, having worked with her on so many different books. I mean, what was it like working with her during the publication process, and why do you think she developed such a loyal and supportive readership from, with your editor hat on? Like, what was the attraction? Why did she have so many loyal fans out there?
Well, first of all, she really cared about her fans. She thought about them as she was writing, and she was loyal to them. She went back to visit them every year. There came a time where we're like, you don't have to do these really long tours anymore. But she wanted to. She wanted to be out there for them because, she knew that they were the basis of what made her successful. And I think her books were really relatable. I think her people were real. You could meet them on the street. They were your best friends. They were your neighbors. They were the neighbors that you didn't like too. So, she understood about community, and she was part of a community, and she created a community. And I think that's why people were so loyal to her. Sad thing about being a writer is, you write a book and it takes a year, sometimes more, and then people read it in a day. And then they come to see you and they're like, when's the next one going to be out?
Yeah.
And it's barely.
What are you
even
working on
ideal.
now? What are
Yeah.
you working on now?
How soon can I read it?
I'm working on recovery. That's what I'm working on.
My mom would be
Is that
like,
the
"I'm
title
working
of your
on
next
lowering my
book,
blood pressure."
Recovery?
Recovery.
These women understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? What about you, Carrie? What do you think? Explains her secret sauce or her success that she had? I mean, was it, and the sort of the loyal following that she was able to build up?
You
The
mean
thing
me?
that makes
Oh,
the thing
okay.
that makes any writer successful is
Yeah.
their voice. And
Yeah.
it's the one thing an editor really can't teach you. You have a voice or you don't have a voice. And she definitely had one, and it really came from deep within her and from everything that people are talking about, her generosity, her humor, her wit, her love for everyone. That all came out in the books. And I think that's what resonated with the readers.
Yeah, Patti, what about you? What do you think about her her legacy and kind of why she was able to be so good at what she did?
I agree with everything Carrie said, and I just think there was this very pure energy that you can't teach someone. You can't say, "Oh, be more charismatic like Dottie," or "be witty like Dottie." Like, it was this, to be cliche, it was this force of nature that was who she was. She loved you fully or she didn't. She loved the story or the book, or she didn't, and she wasn't going to write it. You couldn't make her be anything other than what she was. You couldn't talk her into being a different kind of writer or different kind of person. And if you listen to the people talking in her books, it was like talking to her. So she was able to take this authenticity and pure energy of herself and funnel it straight into a book.
That's great. Mary Alice, do you have a favorite Dorothea Benton Frank book? I mean, is there one that you sort of look back on and just feel like that book speaks to me? Is there one that you look particularly fondly on?
But I think for me, it's, people always, and I didn't read it for the first, until after she'd written it a couple of years. I mean, I finally read it, and it was the first one, Sullivan's Island. And I think she found her voice in that book. I mean, because that was it, she declared who she was as an author in that book. And I was going to say one of the things that I loved most about that book in particular, but all of them, is her love for the Low Country. And that was very real. And we both wrote about the same geography. And yet we each had our own different take on doing it, which is why I think our fans tend to cross. They usually like both our books, but there was no question about voice. We each have distinctly different voices, and hers really did define a kind of love for the Low Country and its people and the traditions and the quirkiness of you have to know it well enough to be able to write about the quirkiness. And she had that ability to make it, like we said before, so real. And it could make you laugh out loud because you reckon the universal was so true. And yet she made it regional in her writing. So I thought that was her real gift.
What about you, Victoria? Do you have a favorite book, one that really spoke to you?
Well, first of all, my mother used to say something that I loved when we were on book tour together. She was like, well, we love our books in birth order. And I was like, yes, because I'm the oldest. I agree with that, Dottie.
We love our books in birth order.
We love in birth order. And that would always get a big laugh. Yeah, I love Sullivan's Island for a lot of reasons, mainly because, like Mary Alice said, she sort of learned how to write. The first book that you write, which I can definitely attest to, teaches you how to sit your butt in a chair, how the discipline, how to write a story, how to entertain, how to hold a whole jigsaw together. But I like Plantation, which right now I can't touch with a 10-foot pole because it's about the loss of your mother, which is like, whew, but
yes.
I think Frances May and Lavinia, which is the mother and the antagonist in the story, are two of the greatest characters ever written. And I really seriously mean that. Frances May to me is the funniest, trashiest, wonderful character. If I ever get another dog, I'm going to name her Frances May.
That's awesome.
I named my third baby.
Victoria, we can make that happen.
Yeah, I know. No, I know. My son's already like, I want 3 dogs. I'm like, call Mary Alice. I don't know what to tell you. But I think Plantation is probably my favorite. And Isle of Palms holds a special place in my heart because I helped her write it when I was like 13. I was on my spring break. She really literally was my best friend. Like, I was in a sorority. I had a bunch of girlfriends, but every single spring break I spent with my mother. So we went to the Cayman Islands. And she sat there with her laptop, which of course was like this thick back then, poolside, and wrote Isle of Palms. And so it was really special. Nice. But I love Queen Bee too. I
was going to say that was tough. I really loved Queen Bee.
Yeah.
I did.
It's nice. And I'm doing this.
I love the title too. Can we just say that's probably the best?
Perfect for her. Yeah. But I'm doing this book club right now on her Facebook, with like probably not that many people watch it, but we're going through all of her books from the beginning to the end. And every month we talk about one. And so I get to revisit them, which is
lovely.
Kind of emotional cutting, but it's also really great because I get to hear stories about why people like that certain book. And so we walk through it together. It's really nice.
That's awesome.
Patti, what about you? Do you have a favorite book that you look back on, or one that really spoke to you?
Like Mary Alice, I found Dottie because of Sullivan's Islands, and it was in that genre of low country fiction that I wanted to write in. And she was joining the ranks of, Pat Conroy and Ann Rivers Siddons and Mary Alice, and this kind of up and coming low country literature that made me fall in love with the place even more. And at the same time, I loved her book, the Grace book. What was that called, Carrie?
Full of Grace.
Full of Grace.
Oh, Full of Grace. That was the first book I did.
That
with
was
her.
your first book with her. And I think I love that book because It was the book people told her not to write, and it was probably the book that didn't do as well as some of her others. And at the same time, I think I loved that so much because she was not going to be swayed. She was going to write that book, and she felt moved to write that book. She felt inspired to write that book, and nobody was going to tell her not to. And I always loved that book for that reason.
And Carrie, is that your favorite? I mean, I'd love to hear you talk. Tell us a little bit about the Full of Grace for folks that may not have read that, what that's about.
There's kind of a mysticism in Full of Grace, and that was actually a part of Dottie's life. I don't know how deeply we all want to get into that, but she definitely did.
A collection of angels I have up here from her office that I have. She loved that, miracles.
Yeah, and
I love that book.
I have a couple of her Marys because she had, that was the thread of Catholicism that stayed with her.
Yes.
So that book was very true to her heart. It also had this hilarious New Jersey family, and she had spent a lot of time in New Jersey, and it was about, people moving to the South, and it wasn't as much about the Low Country as the natives knew. It was a little bit different. And so I do think that a lot of people like that book for various reasons. I actually enjoy The Last Original Wife because I love the way that it starts, where there's these couples in Scotland and they're all the men are with their brand new trophy wives with, their beautifully dyed hair and all of that. And there's one woman who's the last original wife, and she's walking down the street. She falls a little bit behind. She falls into a manhole and nobody notices. And then she's like, okay, that's it. I'm taking charge of my own life. And I think it's hilarious. And I don't know whether this is true or not, but she told me that actually happened.
She said that happened to a friend of hers. Yeah.
Yes.
My mom would
and nobody noticed until the hospital called that she wasn't there.
Her husband was golfing in St. Andrews, and he was mad that he had to stop golfing and go to the hospital to help his wife. She broke her collarbone. I mean, it was really bad. And my mom always, one of her things that she would always say, like someone would tell her a horrible story and she'd listen, and then she'd be like, there's a book.
That's a book.
That's a book. Exactly. And that's
all material.
She said that so many times. There are so many more books that she would have written.
Yes, totally. Yes.
And I wish she did. Yeah.
That's right. So I'm going to go a little bit to, something we've talked about in part is just this love of the South and this love of the Low Country. And maybe, Patti, you set your stories in the Low Country. Talk a little bit about what it is to write about this region, why you've become so infatuated with the region, and why you think it speaks to readers in the way it does.
So the region is as mystical as any region in the country in the United States. But I'm a bit of a fraud when it comes to the Low Country. And a number of my books are not set there. But I grew up north. I know it's crazy, but I was born in New Jersey. I grew up in Philadelphia and Fort Lauderdale. So I did not really understand or become enamored with the South until I went to college in Alabama and found Ann Rivers Siddons, who went to the same college I did, went to Auburn, and found Pat Conroy. And we had always had a place in the Low Country. My in-laws lived on Defusky Island. I got engaged on Defusky Island. We, had a place down there. So for me, opposite than Dottie, I came to the Low Country with outsider eyes. Dottie was born and raised on Isle of Palms, or on Sullivan's Island. And so she knows every quirky thing, every smell, every aroma, every tide. And I think that there's a wonderful balance in seeing it with an outsider's eye, as the family did in Full of Grace, and like I did, and then being an integral part of it. But for me, we often talk about, and Dottie did too, about character being setting being a character. And at the same time, I think that setting is a petri dish from which the entire story grows. And if you get the setting wrong, the story doesn't fully grow into what it's meant to be. So a deep love for the Low Country when you're writing those stories was quintessentially important.
And Victoria, do you think that, obviously your mom grew up on Sullivan's Island, but she marries this guy from New Jersey. Where's your dad from? Or that she moves to New Jersey, marries this guy not from the South. I mean, how do you think that changed the way your mom thought about the South and South Carolina and the Low Country?
That is a weighted question. My dad is, well, they met in New York, and they lived together in the city for a long, long time. I was born there. And they were set up on a blind date, and they were madly in love. It was both of their second marriages. But all of her brothers brought her, when she brought him to meet them, my Uncle Billy, who's in heaven now with my mom having a cocktail, I'm sure, he was like, I can't believe you're going to marry a Yankee. And she says, well, he's from Germany. So he goes, it's all right. He's a foreigner. So I think living in New Jersey most of the time and not being in the Low Country sort of romanticized it for her. And so she would write about it. And I think her best writing, like Carrie said, the book came at March, would happen between the months of January and March when it was gray and snowing and awful. And she missed us here in the South. So I think it was a romance for her. And we would always joke in my family that Sullivan's Island was the center of the universe. And the mainstream by Dunleavy's pub, we called it the Champs-Elysees and like all this stuff.
I love that.
I think you can write about something. I think all of her books are love letters to the Low Country.
Oh, I agree. That's very nice.
And yeah, Mary Alice, you have written so much important work about the landscape and environmental issues. And yeah, I mean, what does writing about this region mean to you? And how has kind of what you've thought about the region evolved as you've evolved as a writer?
I think that both Dottie and I understood that when we write about a place, it also draws a lot of attention to place. And there's a responsibility to try and protect the space, to keep the Low Country what it was we love about the Low Country. And I think in my work, the landscape, it's more of the why of my writing was to bring an awareness, not to nostalgia, because there's so many pertinent issues facing the landscape and the people here that I wanted to make sure that was always in the foreground. On the other hand, this is storytelling. We're telling the stories of lives and families, and especially as both of us are grandmothers, we wanted to include young people and grandchildren, and that's always at the forefront of a novel, is the interpersonal relationships. And as Patti said, the setting is critical, and it's a character in the novel. And I think both of us were keenly aware in our own way to protect what we loved, to bring awareness to, I think for me, maybe a bit more of the flora and fauna, and Dottie very much the customs and traditions, don't you think?
Yes, totally. Yeah, you have a more ecological bent toward the whole.
Mm-hmm. And yet we both loved the same place.
Carrie, from your perspective as an editor, are there some other writers that fans of Dottie should be looking at or pay attention to? I mean, who are some folks that you think her fans would really probably enjoy reading, and just some folks that you might recommend to folks that really like the work of Dottie?
Well, there's two authors, of course, Mary Alice Monroe.
Sure.
And Patti Callahan Henry. Start there. But yeah, there's other parts of the country, and there's other beaches too. Like, Ellen Hildebrand has a book out today. And she mentions Dottie in it.
Oh, it's Tuesday. Yeah. Oh my gosh, congrats, Ellen. Yes.
We love her.
Yeah, and I've already read
too.
this. And what I love about this book is it starts with the characters in heaven looking down and managing things.
Yeah.
And I like to think about Dottie doing that. So
I agree.
Well, that's sort of what was in Beach Reunion, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So there's there's a lot of writers who write about different beaches, different states, but I think that people who love their location and write about it with heart. I think those will always be attracted to Dottie's books, and Dottie's reader will be attracted to theirs.
Can I
Well,
jump in and say there's
I
a
was
new
going to say,
book that
What?
Gervais Haggerty in Polite
Oh.
Company is coming out with a
Well,
book.
I feel embarrassed about always just pushing my books, but
Well, we'll
yes,
do it.
Gervais Haggerty, who's local.
No,
Fine,
she's
I'm okay.
wonderful.
Yeah, let's pump her. Yeah, she's great. She's
Yeah.
the
She's
best.
great. We already have quotes from Sue Monk Kidd and like amazing people. And she's a Charleston native, and her family has been there for generations. And her second book is also really cool. It's just such a cool idea. So I'm really excited for her book to come out this summer. Yes,
Wait, yeah.
read Gervais.
And she's like a cool, like the cool girl.
She's
Like,
so
I was
cool.
like,
I know.
I know,
I really wish I
everybody
could grow
watching
up and
this.
be her. I'm such a spaz compared to Gervais. She's like gorgeous and blonde. She's perfect children, and I'm like, I
But
want
no, no. What I love is she's got a tool belt around her hips, and she'll build a bookshelf.
Yeah.
That's what I love
Yeah.
about Gervais. And she surfs, so that's cool.
the whole
And she
family
does
is
surf.
talented,
She
too.
surfs. But, everyone should follow her Instagram because she's really crushing it. And
Yeah,
her
she's
life
doing
looks
great.
so fun. So that. And then I have another book out this summer called Summer on the Bluffs, which is about Martha's Vineyard by Sunny Hostin, who's on The View. So that's a fun book too. There's a lot of fun books out there for everybody.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about what some of you guys are working on and kind of what you see as kind of next projects. And Victoria, I'll start with you. I mean, I know you worked on a book with your mom that you guys wrote. Was it Eddie Spaghetti, I believe? Is that correct?
Eddie Spaghetti.
Yeah. So that was a children's book, a
cute.
great book.
Yes,
But
it
tell
was
us,
really cute.
tell us like what you're working on and kind of what you kind of see going forward for your sort of writing career.
So every single day, I'm at my desk trying to be funny and creative. I'm working on my first novel, which I'm about to finish. Working with an
Awesome.
editor, Maggie Crawford, who was suggested to me
Congratulations.
from Carrie, and she kicks my butt every day. But it's so good because I did not graduate from college with an English degree, so I need a little help.
Neither did I.
And neither did my mom. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's okay. I think once you're a storyteller, you're a storyteller. And I graduated with a degree in theater, so I've always been a storyteller in one way or the other. But I'm working on a novel that is set in the Low Country about a girl who inherits a restaurant from her family, and it's a multi-generational sort of ensemble piece. And I've been working on it forever, but pretty hardcore the past year. So because I got babies, so I've been busy.
That's so great, and it's right in your wheelhouse. How wonderful! I can hardly
So
wait.
proud. I know, that's awesome.
Oh, well, believe me, y'all.
We
will be
can't
sure
wait
you
to
about
read
that.
it.
We're gonna
We all
come
Cannot
can't wait
wait.
to read it.
So excited
Thank
to
you.
get some books
I
out.
need all my godmothers for sure. It's I just passed 360 pages, so it's actually
Oh,
something.
bravo!
So it's not just like nothing, like a lot of people are like, I'm gonna write a book, and you're like, okay. It's an actual. When I printed out, my husband, who is the greatest man alive, looked at it and he was like, man, he's like, that's sexy, and I was like, why? Because it all came from your brain. I was like,
Oh,
great. And he's like, look at that, like you made that, and I'm like, I made that, so I'm working on my
That's
book.
awesome.
I'm trying to finish my first draft, and hopefully some of those readers will like my book too, and I'll be able to
Wonderful.
be another jewel in the crown with all these amazing women.
Well, that's so exciting.
Victoria,
Yeah.
you have to write a book for Thea.
So we're sort of the joke. Teddy Spaghetti is what I called Teddy when he was a baby. And so my mom was like, that sounds like a children's book. And my son calls Thea, who's Dorothea after my mom, Thea Ballerina. And so we thought,
Oh, there you are.
Cute. So
There you are.
we might do that. But children's books are not my thing. I think forever, but I would be, right now I want to focus on my novel.
Yeah.
But if another one comes, I've talked to an editor about a Christmas book before, Christmas cookbook, children's book. But I think that's shelved for now, and I'm going to try to just do the novel thing for a while.
Good for you.
Yeah, congratulations.
you.
That's really exciting.
Thank
that's
you.
awesome.
So exciting.
So
very
proud.
exciting.
Thank you.
What-
If y'all could send me a text message once a day and be like, "Steal your
All right.
that'd be
First,
great.
when you get tomorrow, you'll be a little busy with your new dog.
Excited. I already bought her like clothes and
I'm
toys
sure you
and
did.
bed. And my husband's like,
She's so
Right.
cute.
So
She's little.
Tell us about this new dog you're getting, Victoria. What's this new dog that's going to come into your house tomorrow?
so I grew up with Cavalier King Charles Spaniels. So Pat Conroy had Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. Mary Alice Carrie Cavalier. So I needed one, you know.
Of course. Yeah.
And she is the most beautiful, funny, spunky. She hugs.
Champion. Let me just point out,
Yeah.
champion.
Yep, she's a champion.
Does she have a
And I
name yet, or are we to be determined? Or
Her name is Lexi,
Okay.
but we love
That's
the show
cute.
Schitt's Creek, which is hysterical, and so we're
Oh my
gonna call
God,
her
so
Lexus. So Lady Lexus is what we're calling her right now.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I can't wait to snuggle her and spoil her rotten.
Oh, she could use spoiling.
She's a mama too, isn't that fabulous?
Yeah, she's a mama.
I lost mine, and I'm bringing one in, and it's
Aw,
like spiritual.
perfect.
I know, I can't wait. I love them.
Well, when you're ready, I'll come over and we'll bring the pups together. They all know each other.
Just let me know so I can. put
Actually,
away-
Carrie, bring Dash. Are you bringing Dash?
Yes.
When I come down, I'll bring Dash. Yeah.
All right, we'll have a love fest.
Yay!
Awesome.
well, Mary Alice, what about you? What are you working on? What's next for you?
I'm very excited. My first middle grade book is coming out June 15th. And I'm sort of a little verklempt by the reception. It's pretty amazing. It's called The Islanders. And it takes place on a remote island called Deweese Island. Or Victoria, you know Deweese. It's a little island accessible only by ferry. And there are no cars, no stores. It's a wildlife sanctuary. I'd lived there, but my husband wants a garage. And the Islanders, I know it's about 3 kids and this is middle grade. So you're looking at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I love that age. These kids believe they can change the world. I really had a lot I wanted to say to them. And these 3 unlikely friends end up on Deweese, and they would never be friends in Atlanta. But there's an African-American boy from Atlanta. There's an Army brat from Jersey, and whose father was injured. And then little Lovey from Isle of Palms, and they're all there. And what they think is going to be the worst summer ever, it opens up their mind as they're unplugged and they explore. And it's everything I wanted to say to kids. It's the first in a series. And
Awesome.
it's being, embraced by so many people. I just found out Amazon picked it for its June pick today. And it's,
Awesome.
I know, really excited. Kwame Alexander gave the blurb. It's taking off, and I'm just thrilled. It's my first one, and it's something I've wanted to do for a long time.
Well, congratulations. How was that different writing for that audience? Was it a different experience?
You know, it is. It's very, very different. You still have to have, it's chapter book I have a couple picture books that's completely another world. But it has a very strong sense of storyline, and you have to heighten the senses for kids. You have to quicken the pace, but you don't want to make the mistake of limiting the issues that you cover, because kids today are very smart and they can take anything. But I think it's really important to be sensitive to how you approach those ideas. So it just poured out. Sometimes that just happens.
That's great. What about you, Carrie? What are you working on, and what's next for you?
Well, I tend to be an editor of summer. So I tend to have a lot of summer books. I have a book called When Stars Collide by Susan Elizabeth Phillips, which is coming out. She's just hilarious, and I love working with her.
Funny.
Yeah, she is.
I have a book by Meg Cabot coming out this summer with an island that's pretty closely resembles Key West, where she lives. I have a really wonderful, very dramatic book coming out from Laura Lippman called Dream Girl, which is kind of her ode to misery.
Wow.
But it's creepy, it's literary, it's really
That's awesome.
fun.
Love it. What's that?
And
one
then I
called?
have so many books. I have a Lisa Kleypas book coming out this summer, a Sarah McLean book coming out, and a book
My goodness.
by Suzanne Park called So We Meet Again, and which is a lot of fun. So yeah, I'm an editor of summer.
Perfect. Patti, what about you?
So I had a book that just came out in March called Surviving Savannah, which is set in the low country of Savannah, but in 1838. It's historical fiction about a true survivor story of women on a shipwreck and modern day. And then in October, I have a new book coming out. Carrie has it. It is called, well, I love that cover. I never get tired of looking at it. I have it on my bulletin board. It is called Once Upon a Wardrobe, and it is set in England in 1950. And October or November of 1950 is when a brand new book burst onto the scene called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And this story is about an 8-year-old boy who is ill and his obsession with finding out where did Narnia come from.
Love it.
Can't wait to read that. That sounds so great.
Thank you.
Oh,
It's
was-
great. I have it.
It was a story like Mary Alice was just talking about her YA that was a touch point for me during the pandemic. It was what I worked on every day. While everything else was going mad about me, Surviving Savannah was already done and in the chute to come out in March. And this was the book that if I could touch that book every day, the rest of the madness going on faded for just a little while. So I'm excited about it coming out in October.
That's so great. We're all very, very excited about it.
it is a beautiful cover. I love that cover.
Yeah, they did a
You
great
make
job.
great covers, Patti. I love Surviving Savannah. It's beautiful to see us. The Becoming Mrs. Lewis. They're beautiful. I love that.
Well-
like, spooky. It's so cool.
Thank you. Your mom. Where did Victoria go?
I'm here. I'm sorry.
Your mom, after Becoming Mrs. Lewis came out, your mom came to me, and I've had a number of people come up to me in the past year, like Ron Block, who say, Dottie said that if you don't continue in that vein, she's going to come back and get you. And I was like, I know. She told me the same thing. You better not go backwards. Keep doing those kind of books. And who am I to not listen to Dorothea Benton Frank?
I remember when you were writing that book, my mom called me, and she, after you had, I guess, pitched it to her, or told her I don't know what you want.
I told her about it over
told her
maybe a vodka or two.
Yeah, and she called me and she goes, you wouldn't believe what Patti's working on now. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And she was so excited about that.
I know. And she was just like, this is your change. This is when you're going to change. She was very supportive.
100% right. 100% right.
Yeah.
So
I think about that sometimes. So.
I think we have
Remember
time.
that weekend at your house, Patti, when we were talking about it over the jigsaw puzzle? Do you remember?
Yes. Gosh, good times.
Yes.
Good times.
Someone
See, and
asked-
those are the things that stick in the craw, right? You know, someone cares enough to notice what you're doing and say, do that. And, you know, whether they're right or wrong, they care enough to be involved. That was her.
Yeah, I thought we'd end just with just a quick question on, why, we've got so many folks that want to write. They're aspiring writers. I mean, Dottie was such a huge supporter of our MFA program at the College of Charleston. So many people who want to make a living as a writer. What advice would you have for folks that are just getting into the business? How to make it and how to be successful as a writer? I mean, Patti, do you want to start us off with that? What would you say?
So that is a 4 to 5 day masterclass that I don't know. I think that there's so many aspects when you talk about how to be successful in writing. So I'm going to steer away from craft for a second and not talk about how to write, but about this need for perseverance. This need to believe that your creative life is just as important as your real life. Just this pure certainty that you are meant to tell a story, because the world will tell you times 1,000 that it's a pipe dream, that it's almost impossible, that there's too much standing in the way. And I think that not always are the most successful writers the quote most talented, but have the most perseverance. People say to me sometimes, oh, you have so much dedication, you're doing it all the time, but it's not as much about dedication as it is about obsession. If I'm reading about story. If I'm listening to a podcast, I'm listening to another author. If I'm traveling, I'm usually researching. I know Mary Alice knows that. She does the same thing. So there's this obsession with it that leads to this perseverance that I think is an invaluable part of becoming a writer.
Mary Alice, anything to add to that or expand on?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I remember when I was young, I think the college entrance class came in and he said, turn to your left, turn to your right. And he says, only one of you will graduate. And I was so offended by that comment. But he was trying to say, this is your competition. You've got to work harder than either one on your left or right if you want to get what you want to get. And I think part of that is I'm so pleased to see the series established, because you're going to provide a forum for other writers to come in. You're creating an opportunity for writers to hear how it's done, to be inspired. But also, I think one of the things that is important is to create a group of fellow writers like we have in Charleston area, or our tribe, as we call it, where we do support one another and we can talk about issues both professionally as well as creatively, and to just keep persevering. As Patti said, you need to have a cadre of trusted friends that will hang in there with you, because it's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. But if you do have that burning desire to tell a story, you get your butt in the chair and you work every day and be present to the story, whatever that means in where you are in developing your story. It's just keeping the focus and building a cadre of support. And I'm so pleased about this series. It's doing just that.
I worked, and Mary Alice knows this, I worked with just a small writer named Nora Roberts years ago. And she always said, I can fix a bad page, but I can't fix a blank page.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about sitting there and doing it, and then going back and revising if you don't like what you've done.
Yeah.
But I will say, as a young editor, one of the things that I used to do is I used to read books on the bestseller list, and then I would read back, all the way back in the catalog, to see, like, what could you see at the beginning that became something else? And I do encourage people to read, like, really understand what's selling now, because it's not always just whatever you want to write that's going to sell. Realize what you're writing into, realize what your audience will be, and think like Dottie, like, who are your readers and what do they want out of what you're writing? And deliver it.
Turn it in.
Turn it in.
Yeah.
And on time.
Now that's the editor speaking.
Carrie, I think my mom used to say this with you all the time. She would say, when she first got started writing, she would write the books she wanted to read, and so I think
yes.
sort of, and like, she sat me down at one point. I said, Mom, I think I want to write. And she said, well, what do you want to read? And I was like, I want to read about restaurant life, because that's my background. And she was like, okay, then write it, and she would always say, like Nora Roberts would, you can clean up a mess, but you can't clean up nothing. So you got to sit down and even if it's garbage, you can edit it tomorrow, but put it down, and it's hard. I mean, I'm just starting, and there are days when I'm like, I feel like it's pulling one letter at a time. Yep. And then there are days when I'm like, yes, so it's just.
But Victoria, kudos to you, because when you're a mother of very young children, I remember those days, and I used to, have to carve out an hour here and there. So bravo to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It happens mostly for me at night these days when my house is quiet. Even though I work 9 to 5 at it, I'm usually editing and plotting and doing other stuff that I have to do during the day. And then I'm writing when everyone is asleep and I don't have to worry about where everybody is. So, but that's the mama,
Yeah.
Well, we've come to the end of our time, but I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this, and want to thank all of you for sharing your incredible memories of Dottie Frank. This program will provide, I know, inspiration to her fans, your fans, and the next generation of writers. So on behalf of the College of Charleston and its more than 97,000 alumni, thank you for joining us this evening, and good night.